how cool is this spot that we're all in? This place is inspiring. So I'm Parker. I work with Jake, and I run the sales program for our pest group that we all work together. I wanted to make a couple announcements tonight before we get started and before I turn the time over to Jake. So if you work with us, we have a sales training tomorrow night at 8. And we're gonna post the address. Cam will post the address on Slack. It's close to campus. And
7:30 for food.
7:30 for food, 8 o'clock for training. It'll be like an hour and a half long training. So that'll be awesome. We hope to see you there. Yeah, I'm excited to be here tonight. I want to share a couple thoughts and just like intro Jake. A lot of you guys know who he is. Some of the group here works with Pointe, and you've interfaced probably more with me than you have with Jake. And so I wanted to take the chance just to kind of intro him real quick. It's gonna be a blessing to hear from someone like him tonight. If you've met Jake before, Jake has such a fun and amazing energy. And for me, sales is the transfer of energy. That's what sales is, and that's why Jake was such an amazing salesperson on the doors. It's why he's been such an amazing boss to me, and someone that I've loved to work with and work for. Is his energy. Like there's a lot of negative things that go on in the world, and Jake always seems to have a smile on his face, and you're gonna see that tonight. He's gonna make you smile. So Jake's story as far as being an entrepreneur, I'm gonna obviously let him tell his own story tonight, but I have known him 8-9 years now, and I can tell you he took a business from nothing to something that was incredibly impressive, and I was able to be there for a lot of that ride. And our hope tonight in throwing this event is to inspire. Like if there's one word that I were to share, like that's our goal tonight. And Jake will definitely do that. But dream big. This is an amazing venue. And have a blast tonight. We love Jake, and I'm excited to learn from him tonight. And then basically we're gonna run this till we're gonna do 30-45 minutes of Jake's time. And then we're gonna pass it over and listen to some music and rock out and have a fun night. So let's give a big hand to Jake Borg.
It feels very formal. It feels super formal. Walking up and getting introduced like that. I'm pretty informal most of the time. So thank you, Parker. I'm excited to be here and have a chance to talk to all of you. The first time I met Parker was in a restaurant, and Austin brought Parker to eat lunch with me. I'll never forget it, man. Austin and Gabe were like, "You got to meet Parker." And how many years ago was that?
Like 8-9 years ago.
Oh, for real?
Yeah,
That's amazing.
8 years ago.
So we've known each other a long time. It's fun to work with such amazing people. I know that there's kind of a mixed group in here. If for the adults in the room, you know, the ones that are, you know, locals and visiting, you can take whatever I say and, you know, do whatever you want with it. My opinions and stories, really for everyone. You know, there's a choice, and this is my perspective, and I want to share some things that will provide insight maybe into my world and some of the things. It's kind of, in some ways, it's a little different talking about myself, which I don't normally do. I've been asked by Gabe and Parker and Austin to kind of share my story and talk about myself a little bit, which is a little different than I've done in the past. But there's some things I want to share, and for all of you, you know, take what you want from what I share, and you can do what you want with that information. And you know, and if I say something that doesn't make a lot of sense to you, that's all right. That's all right. I do want to, this is basically the headquarters for Lookout Enterprises. And so I know some of you saw my office, And I want to talk a little bit about Lookout Enterprises for a minute. Do any of you know what Lookout Enterprises is? Does anybody have any idea? How many of you that are selling currently have a business that we pay you under? Okay, a few of you. Lookout Enterprises was born and started, so my business is Lookout Enterprises. And when I was deciding to sell pest control and really commit and was gonna be paid as an independent contractor, my accountant said, you need to create a business and you need to name it. And at the time, I was living in North Idaho and I was elk hunting near the border of Idaho and Montana, near what's called Lookout Pass. And I really was kind of just, you know, trying to decide what to name this business. I didn't really understand exactly why I was naming the business or starting the business. And so Lookout Enterprises, I just named it after some elk hunting grounds. And I have an affinity for the mountains. And I used to joke with one of my friends, Kyle Woodbury, who I worked with, and I would say, look out, you know, because that was my business. And I thought it was funny. And I laughed at my own joke a lot of times. And then he would do it back to me once in a while. And he'd be like, look out. You know, I wanted to be, you know, I wanted to look out. So, and when I was a kid, I went to Lookout Towers. And when you're in a lookout tower, more than once we rented lookout towers in Idaho. You know, there's some of you may not know this, but you can reserve old lookout towers, fire lookouts. And I've stayed the night in some, and some of the most epic views I've ever experienced and memories are being in an old lookout tower. And so Lookout Enterprises is my business. It's the first business I ever started. And it was just like a lot of you, the entity that I was going to get my commissions for the pest control sales that I was doing. I took my water somewhere. Parker, will you grab my water for me? I may just need a new one, John, thanks. So I want to talk a little bit about, thank you. I want to talk about a couple things. I want to touch on some curiosity. I want to touch on confidence and certainty. And I want to talk a little bit about various states of being and like what state you're in. And I'm not talking about Idaho. I'm talking about your state, right? Do any of you know what I mean when I say that? Not your state you're living in, but your state. Junior, do you know? He's like nervous because I'm looking at him. What's your state? You know what? I'm going to ask you to participate. I should warn you. Go ahead.
Like state of mind.
Your state of mind, okay? Like your state of being, right? We're going to talk a little bit about that. What state of being helps you perform at a high level? I want you to think about that a little bit. I'm going to come back to it. How many of you ever heard, you know, Stephen Covey has a thing that he says that is probably the most common quote, and it's begin with what? The what?
Yeah.
The end in mind. How many of you heard that? That's amazing. Begin with the end in mind. Well, I don't think I've done a very good job in my life of beginning with the end in mind because there's been times in my life as a professional and an entrepreneur where I really never really understood what I was capable of doing. And so the end, whatever my goal was, which is what Covey talks about, is when he talks about beginning with the end in mind, it's your goal, right? So what's your goal? You know, at the end of the summer or next year or in 4 years after you get your degree or, you know, in 10 years, like start with where you want to be and then figure out how to get there. And I think personally that I've actually not done that great a job of understanding my own capabilities. And I kind of want to talk through that and help you understand. I think in a lot of ways, most of us don't understand what we're really capable of. And if you're like me, who, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal life a little bit, but if you're like me, where I really sucked at a lot of things and still do, I think. I've never really been the best at anything I've done. In all the years that I sold door to door, I got really good at it. I was never the top. I was never the best. In high school, I was like a C student most of the time. My first year at Rick's College, I got like a 1.8 GPA. I know it's impressive. And Mark Crapo, who's back there, like, who went to school with me, probably understands why. Like, I had an archery class and it was at 7 a.m. And who does that? Like, I can't be at a class at 7 a.m. So I got a D, that impacted that GPA. But I really wasn't good at school, man. School is not my thing. I love baseball. I played baseball. I made the varsity team, played in one game for like 2 minutes. I ran for office in high school, probably 3 times, and never won. And so one thing I did have was I had a lot of friends, and I was really good at socializing. And all my teachers, you know, were very aware of my interest in socializing. I was really good at that. So I made lots of good friends. Boy, my cell phone is like going crazy. Let me see if I can silence it. It's going nuts. You guys hear that every time? Ding, ding. It's like every time a bell rings. Mark, I may need to silence that on my actual phone. See if that did it. I want to reference my notes or I'll just shut my computer off. Let me turn the volume down. Smart. Why don't you guys speak up? I muted it. I think we're good. I hit mute. See, I'm telling you, I'm not that smart. The first time I ever was in a meeting and showed interest in selling pest control, there was a guy that was talking about his previous summer. And I remember sitting in a group, just like some of you are now, and watching this guy present. And I thought, if that guy can sell 400 pest control customers in the summer, I can do that. Hopefully at some point during the things I share tonight, some of you think like, if someone is unsuccessful and as many issues as Jacob Borg can do well selling pest control, then certainly you can do at least as many as I do. Because I lost my train of thought. Where was I when I stopped all the dinging? Anyone? All right, I'll figure it out. Okay, so I sucked, right? That's where I was. Craig will just be like, you were talking about how you sucked. And so in a lot of ways, I don't feel like I was that good at a lot of stuff. My freshman year at BYU, Idaho, or Rick's when I was there, I got put on academic probation because my GPA was so low. So I left for Jamaica for a couple of years. And when I was in Jamaica, luckily, the guy that was over the mission that I was serving was really interested in mentoring people, and he had a good business mind. And on the only day off a week that we had, he would meet us in his office and he would give us life advice. And he was incredibly helpful so that when I came back from Jamaica, I had a little bit more belief in myself. But I kind of want to talk through this concept of this state of mind. If you were to think about what state of being helps high performers succeed and accomplish a lot, do you have any ideas? Like, can you give me an idea what you think, what state of mind you need to be in, what state you need to kind of encompass in order to be a high performer? Negativity? You think being negative will help you?
Yes.
I like it, I like it.
Confidence.
Confidence, okay?
Flow state.
What's that?
Flow state.
Flow state. Ooh, I like that, I like that, I like that. What will really help you like get the results that you need? What do you think? Discipline, okay?
Abundance.
Abundance, okay? I've been listening and learning, from another mentor I have, and been watching some videos, and I watched a video where he talked about the 3 different states that he's noticed help high performers really succeed. And the first one that he shared, that he was committed to, he spent about 5 minutes getting ideas from the audience as he talked, and he was like, you're close, and that's not quite it. And the thing that he shared that he said is the initial state that really helps someone perform is being desperate. And I'm curious if any of you ever really felt desperate. And when you hear that word, like, how does that resonate to you? You know, like, have you ever been really desperate? I mean, I've tried to take inventory of the times when I was really desperate, and as I listened to this man present, I thought about it and was like, oh man, I can see that. I can see that. He talked about the desperate man is the most committed. And in life, I think there are certain times when you're really desperate, and that's what will really drive you to be in a state that will push you to accomplish something. I mean, you think about, for me, my first summer I sold, I'm gonna kind of intermix my story as I talk through some of this, but my first summer that I sold pest control, I went to California, and I was mostly interested in making money and spending time with friends. And I wasn't that desperate. I was interested and motivated to make money for the summer, and kind of survive and pay my bills and those things. And I went, and about 2 months in, the company I worked with went out of business. And they farmed us off to another company halfway through the summer. And I did okay. And at the end of the summer, I was like, I'm never doing that again. And the wild part about that is, you know, it's like, I've been doing it ever since. But I didn't really feel desperate. I just needed to pay for school, and that was kind of, I wanted to have money to date, and that was fine. And the next summer, I decided to sell pest control again, and I went back to California. And that's the summer that I met Gabe Sheridan, who's my business partner today. And that was a long time ago. Gabe doesn't like when I tell the year that took place, but it was 1998, I think, right, Johnny? I think that's right. So that summer I decided to sell pest control again. I was engaged. I was starting to feel a little desperation. Like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to pay bills and pay my own rent and purchase a car and buy my groceries if I don't perform. And I started to kind of, that desperation kind of started to settle in. And as I was thinking about this man who was sharing these 3 different states and what helps you be successful, I'm like, yeah, I felt a little desperate that summer. Like, I had to make it happen. I also don't think that I was mature enough to recognize how important, you know, maybe the summer could have been. And I did okay. It was a decent summer. I think I sold 230 units. And at the end of the summer, I was, you know, fairly satisfied with how it went. And then I decided to sell pest control again the following summer. And I went to Florida. And in Florida, I found that desperation was really setting in. And I was feeling the weight of kind of life at a young age. And I committed to really do the job and be the best I could possibly be. And there's a couple of things that I want to share with you, but when you put yourself in a state of desperation, you can put yourself in a state of desperation, but you're not always going to be in that state. Being desperate is not hopeless. So when you're hopeless, I think in some ways you don't really feel like there's a way out. Being desperate, I think, connotates that there's a path. And I felt like there was a path and I committed to that path. I wasn't frustrated. And I think that in sales and in business, every entrepreneur at some time probably feels that state of desperation. I can tell you the very first door I ever knocked, I remember being so scared. I had no idea what to say. There was no preseason training. I showed up for the summer and was given a 5-minute, correlation, and then they threw us out on the doors to figure it out. It was really, it was scary, man. And so part of my story is, selling pest control every summer. I went to Florida. The following summer, I went to Louisiana. And one of the messages that I want to share that I think would be helpful is for everyone here to kind of understand the path that it took for Pointe to come to be. And I was pretty naive during this process. I didn't really understand what it meant to scale a business or my position. And I was asked to recruit an office for Louisiana. And I went to New Orleans and I took 3 of my friends to New Orleans for the summer. And it was a pretty good summer. And there was moments of desperation that helped me continue to grind out and sell and accomplish my goal. The following summer, I went to Virginia. And in Virginia, I recruited 3 people and 2 technicians. And it was the best summer that I can remember ever having. It was my last summer because I graduated from college and I was going to check that box and never sell pest control again. That's kind of a recurring theme like for me. And I checked the box. I had a great summer. I had first-year reps that were all in the top 5 of first-year reps. One of my first-year reps sold 400 units. One sold 350, and my younger brother sold around 300. And I managed a small team, kept it intact, survived, made 90 grand for the summer, which at the time was bonkers. It was bonkers. I know today lots of sales reps that work for our organization and other organizations make way more than the time. Yet the summer, 90 summer was crazy. And then I said, okay, I checked that box, and I went and got a job in Boise at the University of Phoenix. And I want to be transparent about some of the pay because I think it's helpful. But I got a job making 40 grand a year, and I was stoked. I got my college degree, and I got a job at the University of Phoenix, and it never really, I never really connected the dots that I was kind of running my own business, scaling that business, getting commissions and overrides for these reps. Walked away to get paid annually less than half of what I was making doing sales in a 4-month period. It was kind of a strange deal. It was almost like I felt like that was the path that every college instructor and other adult in the room suggested we should do. And it's so weird how the culture in colleges and universities and even in high schools and in life, we're training employees to go and get jobs and work for a wage and get paid for time. And in some ways, I just bought right into that and I applied for jobs. At one point, I applied for a pharmaceutical sales rep job and I was so excited. And during that interview process, I was asked to do a role play for a drug that I was required to help promote to this doctor. And I personally don't take a lot of drugs or medicine. And I looked at this piece of paper during this role play, and it asked me to sell something called acetaminophen. But if you've never seen acetaminophen written down on paper, which I hadn't, I didn't know how to pronounce it. I was like, what is this word? And the person on the other end of the role play doing the interview, I'm sure they didn't hire me because I couldn't even pronounce acetaminophen. I didn't know what acetaminophen even was, if I could pronounce it. So it was a pretty ugly process, but I got that job at the University of Phoenix. And after a few years of success there, I transferred to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and took a job at the University of Phoenix. And I was over their recruiting division and was in charge of a group of student recruiters. And this is where my career really started to kind of change, where as an employee of a big university, which was a for-profit business, I got to see the inner workings of a real company. And I got to see what a human resource department looked like, an accounting and finance department looked like, a sales department looked like. I got to wrap my head around what an operations department looked like. Anybody know what the operations department of a university is? It's instructors. And the delivery of what we would sell was the instructors that would teach the students. And I got to witness what that was like. And it was a fascinating environment. There was a lot of learning that took place, but about 2 years after having that job in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene, I said, you know what, it just doesn't add up. I was getting about $80,000 a year for a job that I was doing year round. And I still, in 3 years of working for that company, hadn't made more than I did in 4 months as a sales professional for the previous company I was with. And I really started my first business when I was about 14 mowing lawns. And I always liked the idea of owning my own business. It just resonated with me, but I was scared out of my mind about doing that. I had no idea what it meant, what I would have to learn and do. It scared me. And so I decided to quit my job at the University of Phoenix. It was a good year-round job. I had good benefits. I had a mortgage, a family, and I walked over to my neighbor's house and said, I quit my job. And he looked at me like I was bonkers. And I felt like I was in trouble. I felt like I was in trouble. And so I went and sold pest control for a couple summers while my kids were young. I raised as much money as I could. And then I decided to start my own pest control company in Spokane, Washington. And not the type of place where historically you think I'm going to do pest control. Normally, I was going to places like Florida, Louisiana, California, and places where there was bugs everywhere. Well, I started that business, and my goal, this is where I go back to this begin with the end in mind. My end in mind when I started that company, this is how naive I want you to think. I want you to understand how naive I was and how naive maybe you are when you think about what you can accomplish in your life. I really thought, I really just want to build a job for myself so that I can be in charge of my own schedule and have my own business. And if I have a couple of employees, I'll be stoked. A couple of employees. And Malia, I'm so stoked that Malia's here. Malia, in 2006, how old were you?
What I agree with that.
No, do you know in that year, when were you born? 95. So you were like 6. My business started in 2006 and 7, right? So you were my neighbor and were like 7 years old. Am I doing the math wrong? Hey, listen, I'm a C student. I suck at math. It's the best. Maybe I'm doing that on purpose. You'll never know, right? You never know. It's part of the gimmick. So you were like 11 when I started my business. Do you remember that? Malia's dad is a good friend of mine, and, he was so supportive. I've had so many people in my life that would support my decisions, and when Bill, Malia's dad, found out that I was gonna start my own business, he was so encouraging to me. And, I had other people that would almost talk to me like I was crazy. And, I really respect, when you're willing to just go and do something that everyone is telling you is a horrible idea, and somebody stands up and says, hey, you're gonna be able to do this, man, and they look you in the eyes and believe in you. And Malia's dad was one of those guys for me. It's amazing. But for those of you who know the story, that's how Pointe started. And when I started, and I'm gonna give you a couple more details, but when I decided to open my first location, I actually decided to open it in Minneapolis. And Minneapolis was a huge city, and I thought, I want to open it in that big city so that I could really get a big company. And I went to Minneapolis, I got a business partner and had a horrible experience with my partner. We were not a good fit for each other. And I ended up selling that business a couple of years later. But in order to start that business, it was just me and some of you that work as recruiters for us and try to scale your own business by going and finding other sales reps to go do sales. I, by myself, drove 2 hours to Moscow, Idaho, and Pullman, Washington, and I had no network there, and I would set up shop in their cafeteria. I'd go and get permission from the school. I'd put a table up, I'd go to career fairs, and I built a small team, mostly from WSU. And when I built that team, the year that I went to Minneapolis, I'm gonna make sure I'm doing good on time here, but the year I went to Minneapolis, my team that I built had some incredible humans that worked for me, but they had a lot of problems. And my kids probably don't remember this, but one night, some of the young men that were working for me were shadow boxing in their apartment, and one of them had an alcohol problem, and the shadow boxing turned into a real fight. And one of the football players from WSU punched the other guy in the face and cut his head open. He went to the hospital. I had to go pick him up, and I had to bring him to my apartment, and he slept on my couch in the apartment with my wife and my kids in the other room. And that's like how my first year started owning my own business. A few weeks after that, my house that I'd left behind to open my own business, a good friend of mine that was my neighbor went over to check on my house, and my whole house had flooded because the supply line to the toilet broke, and the water was running in my upstairs for all I know for weeks at the time. And so my house, while I was gone, was getting destroyed by water. And meanwhile, I'm out there trying to babysit some rambunctious WSU students that weren't typical, the typical type of student that we recruit today. And so I remember finding out about that. And I also, right at that same time, had an issue with one employee related to a non-compete that I was enforcing, and I broke down and I called my brother, and my brother lived in Meridian, and I had no one to talk to, and I went out in the parking lot and I bawled my eyes out. And it was like, I felt desperate. It was the most desperate time as a professional that I've ever felt. And that desperation sunk deep into my bones. And I finished that summer in Minneapolis, went to Spokane, Washington, and lived between two homes, one that was flooded, and started Pointe at the end of that summer out of my garage, and really just had hope that it would work out. And I had a small company in Spokane at the end of the summer, and a small company in Minneapolis, And the Minneapolis company ended up not working out. I sold it to Terminex. My partner and I were able to separate. I got 50 grand that was left after we sold the business and paid our debts and a couple trucks. And that was that story. And then I got to focus on the business in my hometown. And I put all my energy into that business. And that desperation that was born that summer turned into what I thought was just me kind of creating a job for myself and a couple of small businesses. It turned into a company that had 300 employees, multiple partnerships. We covered 4 states, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and Montana. When Gabe and I decided to go into business together, we brought him on as a partner and he helped take over all of our door-to-door recruiting, which at the time I was primarily doing out of 2 non-traditional schools, Washington State and Moscow, Idaho. And Gabe centralized all of our recruiting, in Utah and back in Rexburg, where we've been recruiting ever since. Shortly after that, we opened Pointe Pros or Pointe Marketing, and that company is what this is today, where we now this summer have Gabe, Jacob, Parker, and Austin, and we, with a group of tremendous leadership across our whole company, are gonna really slay it with the amount of bodies that we're gonna plug in to really, really talented talented groups of leaders that are gonna go out this summer and really slay it. But that's kind of the brief version of the history of what we went through. I want to share with you before I open it up to some questions and meander through a couple of other topics that might help before we start the music. But the other 2 states that typically help entrepreneurs or business owners or high performers really succeed are persistency. So you're either desperate and you're doing it because it's the only option that you have and you take massive action to proceed, or you figure out how to be persistent. I'll give you an example of persistency. You might not be interested, or maybe you're not at a point in your life where you're so desperate that you have to go to the gym or you won't be able to walk. Like the desperation might not be there for your physical self, but you figure out that, you know what, I might not be totally desperate, but I'm going to be persistent and I'm going to go every day to hit my goal. And so persistency can help you achieve some massive success too. And then the other option is to be totally obsessed. Do any of you feel like you've ever been in any of those 3? Yeah. What does it resonate a little bit when I talk about those things? What is it? Do you know if it's obsessed about something? Completely obsessed. Yeah. What are you obsessed with right now?
My family.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the difference between being obsessed and being persistent, do you think? Anyone?
All you think about.
I mean, I think if you're obsessed, I think you're gonna maybe have a little bit of you're gonna have some difficulty with longevity. There's some burnout if you're totally obsessed. I think operating in one of those quadrants can actually be really helpful. One of the other things that I feel like I've processed lately is this idea of being happy. At what point do you arrive somewhere and you're happy, do you think? I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring that out. And I actually think that it's kind of helpful to accomplish something and feel happy that you've accomplished it. And then you kind of have to move on from that. If I was constantly in a state of happiness, I don't know that I would continue to improve or take action to get better. So I actually, I think I shared this with someone. I don't know if anyone in this room heard me talk about this, but have you noticed today that there's signs I feel like I've either seen them on social media or a billboard that says, "You're enough." You guys seen that? You hear that sometimes today? You're enough. I think that's such bull. It's like, what? You're enough? What? I never. I mean, okay, let that set in for a minute and then move on, okay? You're enough. Feel it for like 5 seconds. You're not, okay? Enjoy it for a few seconds, but you're not. I mean, I'm not. If I felt like I was enough, what would propel me to move forward? I think that you're not enough and that we set limits on ourselves way too much. And I personally like that mentality. I like it. You haven't made it. Nobody's made it. This is about progression and it's about improvement and about taking action. And I think if we get real comfortable with the painful things that we deal with and we just let the pain set in and get frustrated and depressed and uncomfortable and we don't take any action, we're gonna feel awful. We're gonna feel awful. And the thing that's helped propel me and help me get through the worst things on the planet that I've had to go through in my professional career is taking steps forward to take massive action and proceed towards whatever goal that I've set. I can't emphasize that enough. The other thing I want to quick share, you guys know about The Secret, okay? I talk about this a little too much, but listen, I got to sell a whole bunch of stuff recently on Facebook Marketplace. And you guys that know me know that I like reggae music. And I really do believe that if you believe and work towards something that's your goal, and you process it, think about it, put it out there into the universe, man, it happens. And this fall, I was selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace, and somebody came to buy something from me. Riley. And who would have ever even thought that in our conversation, I'm like, oh, somehow it came up that he had a band and he said he plays reggae music. And now today, we get to hear Riley and what's your band's name? Triple Lindy. And we get a party with Triple Lindy because the universe brought us together, right? The universe brought us together. I actually think that it's not the universe that brings us together. I think that all of you can predict your own future way more than you realize. You can predict your future. Okay. I can do a better job of predicting my future. And if you begin with the end in mind and you talk about it with the people around you, talk to me about it. I might go, dude, that's what you're going to shoot for? Elevate your goal. And you know what? When you hit that goal, you can go, okay, I accomplished that. I'm gonna set my sights higher. I never, ever would have thought that I would end up in the place that I actually was stoked to live in Teton Valley and never thought it would happen. And it did because it was in my mind and I was working towards it subconsciously. It's the real deal, man. And now I'm in Teton Valley and I'm closer to Rexburg, which means I'm closer to some of the business that we do here. And somehow we get to listen to reggae music and rock music in this airplane hangar in Teton Valley. It's just amazing how things like happen like that. But guess what? It happens because individuals commit and work towards something. So anyway, I hope that helps, man. I want all of you to come away with belief in yourself, a little bit of background about our story, And I'd love to answer questions for a couple minutes. I know, you know, I probably have a few minutes to answer questions. I'm eager to listen to the band, but I hope that helps. Hope that helps. What do you got? Any questions? Cam's like, clap, let's go. Cam, yeah, Parker?
I think your mindset shift,
Yeah, when I sold the business in Minneapolis, I had reps that were out there knocking. And the following summer, I made sure that I signed all those reps to come to Spokane. And I was really just focused on scaling the Spokane business. And then after after a couple of years in Spokane, I said, let's open a new geographic area. And we went to Tri-Cities, and then, and it really, Parker, took me a while. I didn't have coaches or trainers around me helping me believe that it could be more than it was. And even when we were 7 years in, when I met with Gabe, it wasn't till about the time I was meeting with Gabe that I said, look at what we've built. And we're in 4 different areas in 3 states. Maybe this could be greater than it was. And I still, you know, I'm still learning that I can scale it even bigger at every, you know, every step. So does that help? Yeah. Yep.
Just for some of the new people, what is your vision for 2020 for Point Marketing, and how do you think we can grow?
That's a good question. So part of my role at Point Marketing is we basically operate like a board of directors. I work with Gabe, our finance team, Parker and Austin, and we strategize where to send all the reps for that company. But my primary role today is running the Palisade Pest Control Company. And I do that remotely with 4 managers. And so I'm focused on running Palisade and making sure that we can deliver the service that we provide. And that our teams, when they sell that service, that they can deliver. And so, you know, Parker honestly is a better person to describe all the things we're gonna do for Point Pros. But it's a massive group, more students than we've ever recruited, more excitement and interest in being part of what we do than we've ever had. You know, I to give you, you know, in the past, in order to pull off the things we've pulled off, I've, you know, hawked it's been a long ride. I've hawked the things that you guys know what that means. You know, you've been to a pawn shop before and hawked a chainsaw. Some of you might not know what that means, but, you know, in order to do what we pulled off, Point Pest Control was a $36 million a year business, okay? I remember calling my mom and dad when I did $100,000 in a month and being like, you're not gonna believe this. We did $100,000 in 1 month. Well, 100,000 in a month times 12 is what? Someone else do that. What's that? 100, yeah.
1.4.
Yeah, so like, I was so stoked when we did about $1.2 million, and that company ended up doing 36 million before I sold my shares to the private equity group. I mean, I just couldn't believe that I ever could start a business that could do $100,000 in a month. I have really successful friends that have started businesses, and I love small business. I think there's a gazillion things that people can do to create their own job and opportunity in their life. Some of my best friends do everything from HVAC work to plumbing, to running marketing firms, and some of my favorite people on the planet decide to be a one-man show or be an employee. And really, it's your path is your path. I just am trying to give you an insight into mine. Yeah.
Like I said, I started 7, 8 years ago. I was like running teams in the Northwest for Jake's business, and my second year that I did that was actually like near their HQ in Spokane, and I was able to see firsthand like
Jake and Johnny were, and their family were actually living like a shop, like really nice shop. I'd say shop. Ask sacrifice, but I would say it was a big for everything they had in public school. And like, it was really cool for me being in my early twenties, being really fresh and to see like the price that you have to pay to go build a basic business. It's years. Like people see these, you know, they see Tesco and what they bought from Pointe Co-Founder, like people think it's going to be so nice, it's like 15 plus years, it's like so much sacrifice. And it was cool for me to like see that journey and investing into it, and everything like that. So like, it takes, you know, delayed gratification. I was like, see that.
Parker shared a little bit about his history, if the Mike didn't pick it up, but about his experience, but, you know, we lived in a barn while we continued to, for 4 years, we lived in a barn. It was a nice barn. Wasn't as nice as the Hangar. But we were sleeping in an RV inside the barn. But, you know, most of you don't know this, but there was, and we don't have this problem today. I don't want anyone to get nervous, you know, but when we would finish a summer and we would see how much commissions we had to pay for the sales reps, Gabe and I didn't always have that money. And multiple times we had to call and scratch and claw and find a way to borrow that money. And I sold 4 rental properties one summer to pay for bonus checks. I borrowed money from my brother. I mean, how lame is that, right? And I paid him a lot of interest for that money. My little brother. I had to borrow money from my little brother to get this thing going. I mean, I felt like such a loser, you know? I had to borrow money from a really talented entrepreneur at a high interest rate. Multiple times we locked in those loans like a week before payroll. I mean, it was desperate. It was desperate. I think all of us can learn to live within some desperation. I think it can be healthy if you're willing to take action, but I don't want to go, you know, any longer. If there's any other pressing questions, I'll field them, but thanks for letting me share a few things. Hopefully it was helpful and helps you in any way, fashion, whether you work for us or not.